Welcome to The Mandate, a show featuring intimate conversations about men's mental health, masculinity, and identity. We bring you stories to inspire you, experts to guide you, and the tools you need to become the man you truly want to be. It's time to sit back, relax, and open up. Live from the Mandate Studio in Austin, Texas, here's your host, Adam Hoffman.
All right, what is up, everybody, and welcome to tonight's edition of The Mandate. I think if you saw any of the social channels, we had to reschedule last week's. We had some fun weather come through Austin, Texas that we got to deal with, but we are live and back here tonight. So, funny story. I was watching that intro video as it usually pops up and does, and I thought to myself, it's very interesting to watch the different styles and specifically the growth of my hair or not over time, depending on what's going on. So, little things like that, just noticing as we go. But today, we're not here to talk about hair, although it might come up, I'm not sure. But I've got a guest that I'm super excited to talk to tonight. We're going to be digging into workplace stress. We're going to be talking about new ideas around resilience, and I'm sure a lot of good stuff just to really help us all be more grounded and present. But tonight I've got Paul Thallner is here. He's the founder and CEO of the High Peaks Group and the Reframer in Chief at Take Back Work. So he's an expert in team effectiveness and organizational change and very passionate advocate for workplace greatness at scale. He advises and consults for organizations around the world and coaches senior level executives, mostly men, which is of course our focus here, to be compassionate and human-centered leaders. So with that, how's it going, Paul?
Awesome. Great. Thanks. So great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have a conversation with you today.
Yeah, I'm ready to dig in, that's for sure. And I definitely, pun intended, it sounds like you've been digging yourself out of some snow as well where you're at.
Absolutely. We've had the snowiest February here in Philadelphia in probably about 4 or 5 years, and my back is telling me that fact more so than the weather person.
There you go. Well, it sounds like you're adept at listening to your body, so that's good.
Yeah, it's hard to avoid that screaming, but yeah, I try to pay attention.
There you go. And I told Paul before the show, I'm nursing a little bit of an injury. So if I laugh and then you see me wince, it's not because I'm making funny faces at Paul. It's because my chest hurts. So we'll just call that out so you don't think I'm making weird faces today. But with that, I always love to jump in just generally, like, how is Paul doing today, this week? What are you feeling? What's top of mind?
Yeah, things are really interesting in so many different ways. I've been thinking a lot about today's conversation in light of the week and couple of weeks that I've had personally and my business has had. And I think it's a microcosm of what we've all experienced, which is just a swirl of highs and lows and challenges and setbacks and advances and kind of this feeling of being happy and sad at the same time. So in general, I'd say I'm in a good place, and feel pretty upbeat and optimistic. And I've got some heavy-heartedness as well because of some family stuff going on. But I think that is part of resilience that maybe we can explore a little bit as our conversation goes on today.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's definitely some stuff that I've been thinking about lately, knowing that we are going to be talking and just general about where I've kind of been questioning my own personal resilience and like, is it as strong as I think that it is? Is strong the right way to think about it? So I'm excited to get into that. But before we talk about resilience, I'd love to just open up a little bit about what has your personal journey been with masculinity, with your mental health? How do you take care of Paul through all these ups and downs? And, what have you been doing lately?
Yeah. So, well, I'll take the first question first, which is a little deeper than how I take care of myself. But, I'm I've been really, really blessed to have strong women leaders in my life, women role models and women leaders in my life. So I've never really kind of attached myself to sort of the masculine, stereotype or paradigm too strongly. Although I was in a fraternity, so I experimented. But my sense is that because I've had such great role models who were women, I've had a little bit more of a balanced perspective going forward. It's affected how I make my choices with professionally and personally a lot of ways. What I choose to engage or not engage with, how I characterize success and failure and that kind of thing. So I don't like, and a lot of my friends have come from families where there was a kind of strong masculine dominated kind of presence. My friends and I often talk about what it is that caused us to even be friends if we had such different experiences and we kind of see the same diamond through different facets and things. So that's pretty continuously on my mind, especially as a solopreneur that has to kind of quote unquote hunt for his food every day, and that kind of thing. So, but how I take care of myself, I was really, really fortunate to take part in a graduate degree program at Case Western Reserve University, at the urging of my sister, who's a ER doctor, strong influence in my life. And that program was all about positive organizational change. This idea that organizations essentially have what they need to solve their own problems. And if you look at them as sets of potential as opposed to sets of problems, you'll find the potential. That's just sort of like the confirmation bias. If you look for problems, you'll find them. If you look for potential, you'll find it. But the interesting thing was they applied that to the individual level too. So there was a course on coaching where we were all kind of exploring the resources we had at our own disposal, our own capability to kind of, weather any storm or surmount any challenge and things like that. So that has led me down this path of continuously thinking about my own emotional and mental and physical well-being and more importantly, the well-being of those around me. So that's specifically how I do that. There's lots of different things I've tried and not succeeded at. But I think the one that has been pretty consistent for me has been meditation. That just really does get me grounded and kind of present for the day most of the time.
Yeah, I appreciate all that. Meditation is definitely one of those ones that comes up consistently. I think every single show that I've done so far, somebody has some type of meditation practice. And what meditation means is different from person to person. So how long did it take you to find your meditation practice routine, and what does it look like today?
It took a long time because I walked into that coaching class really skeptical. I mean, my professor started burning incense to cleanse the aura of the room, and that is just not my jam at all. I didn't understand that. So I thought, this guy's a quack. But but turns out he is, the professor is Richard Boyatzis, and he's a world-renowned researcher in the brain science of resilience and coaching. So that helped me kind of buy into this notion and listen to his thoughts around meditation and other well-being practices being legitimate, because it does rewire your brain. It does, there are physiological effects. So the fact that there was science behind it helped me kind of get past my initial skepticism, which was a pretty high bar, and then try things like meditation. We meditated in class, and some students, some of my classmates had some things that they tried, and which was hard for me, honestly, because you always have that narrative in your head, like, I'm doing it wrong, and why am I thinking I shouldn't be thinking? Why am I, it just kind of spirals. So, but now after a while of just practicing and experimenting with different types of, meditation, and also being a lot more compassionate with myself, I'm able to just kind of, do 10 minutes a day and feel really okay about it,
Yeah, it seems like the pattern there is try stuff until you find something that you like, be persistent and kind of stick with it, and try your hardest to not judge yourself. It's kind of what I heard come through.
100%. Yeah. All three of those are sort of the trifecta of challenge with trying new things, especially the, not trying to judge yourself part. That's always a difficult one.
Yeah, I know. One or all of those are always hard, is what it feels like, for sure.
Yeah.
So what is your, when you meditate now, are you like use an app kind of a guy? Do you listen to music? Do you just sit by yourself and breathe? What does that look like?
Yeah. When it's nice outside, I just kind of I try to do walking meditation and just sort of be like really aware of what my body's doing and my surroundings, and that, clear my head that way. But whether like this, I use Headspace or Calm or have these guided meditations that really are mainly, there to help you focus on, to remind you to focus on your breathing, or, like not to, quit thinking, but just to kind of refocus on one small thing.
Got it.
Yeah.
Anything else these days that's helped you stay grounded and level?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, and I mentioned this in our pre-talk, the pandemic has really, for me, I'm a massive extrovert, so not being around people has been a huge challenge, and my job had been traveling pretty much nonstop. So the last year has been an opportunity for me to figure out how I can stay in touch with folks and create my own communities and partnerships, so that I can maintain my own kind of well-being and be at my best every day. So that's what I've been trying to do. But that wasn't obvious to me at the very beginning. It sort of came as a shock to me that I was like, what is this feeling I'm having? This is really unpleasant. I don't know what. Oh, I think it's loneliness. Like, I should probably do something about that.
How did you get into? We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, which is why I'm curious. What helped you get from I have this feeling to it's loneliness?
Well, it's kind of funny because I think there were just like all these like flashing lights all around me that I just wasn't paying attention to. Like, I knew and know that I'm an extrovert. I know myself well enough to know that I am more creative when I'm with other people. I'm at my best in dialogue or in collaboration and things like that. And I would, just say these things to my wife, who would, kind of say, yeah, and what are you doing about that? Just kind of like holding up the mirror and saying, you do have an opportunity actually to, you can talk to other people besides me, if you'd like, so that was a big help, just to have that, to have someone who knows me and as well as I do about myself, just sort of reflecting back those things that I've said over the years about what makes me happy and what makes me perform well. That's kind of that's how I was able to see the obvious that was sitting right in front of me.
Yeah, it's magical when you've got somebody in your life who, in your case, your partner, who can show that mirror back to you or hear it and say it back to you in a way that you can then hear it. That always isn't the case with people out there. So, yeah, I guess just noticing the gratitude for having great partners who can listen and help us through this, and for you for being able to really communicate that stuff openly, which also isn't always the norm for guys.
Yeah, I think there, and maybe that was another flashing light of obvious that it took me a while to notice. And my executive coaching engagements, I would give people the advice that I should have been taking for myself, and it was like taking notes, writing things down. It's like, oh, that's really brilliant. It's like, who am I writing that for? That I might just need to take this page for myself and put it over here in my folder. So, those accumulation of data points, sort of somehow collect in your brain, and then all of a sudden the penny drops and you're like, oh, this all applies to me too.
Yeah, the pieces all fit into place, or you cleared the clutter enough to see it. It's kind of the mental picture that I get.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's jump into resilience then. I think talking about what it's been like for you for COVID, which now we're over a year, I think, of in it. I've heard various points in the last couple of weeks say, oh, it's the 1 year anniversary. I'm like, oh, that's a really weird way to think about it, But when you think about resilience, what does resilience mean to you? Is there like an agreed upon definition of it, or does it vary? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people who think of it as bouncing back from a setback, getting back to a point of stability after something occurs that takes you off course or pushes you against the definition, against the direction you've been going. And a lot of successful resilience practices help people, who are facing very strong headwinds, get back to feeling like they've got some direction, or they've got some efficacy in the process, or maybe just can cut the breeze a little bit and kind of move forward anyway. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that sort of definition or approach to resilience. I think it's really important. It does, it does get really close to, this idea of it's actually kind of a deficit-based model. I think when I think about setbacks and returning back to normal, I'm thinking like the pandemic. Everybody's like, when are we going to get back to normal? It's like, well, we're not actually going to get back to normal. And what was so great about normal anyway, that we want to get back to it? Why don't we skip that and go to the next thing? So when I think about resilience, I think there's, it's an opportunity. These headwinds that we're facing, or these setbacks that we're experiencing, are opportunities for us to skip past wherever it was we were and go to whatever definition we want to create for ourselves in a new way. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about resilience, is a little bit more of a strengths-based approach, or an abundance model, where these setbacks create opportunities to just kind of redefine.
Got it. It's a friend sent me an Alan Watts book recently that I've started reading, and the section that I was just in was kind of talking about how, as humans, we've created this obsession with always living in anything but the present, right? And it's like, oh, well, tomorrow it'll be like this. So if I can just get tomorrow, it'll be okay. But if you go with that line of thinking, then there's always tomorrow, which creates also, or you're living in the past and hoping that we get back to that normal, as you mentioned, when in fact there's so much goodness in the present. And there's a great example of somebody, or an anecdote about a person who is expecting to have a surgery in 2 weeks. And they're just, for those 2 weeks, they're just thinking about how miserable the surgery is going to be and how hard it's going to be. And how fast they be able to get back to normal, when in fact they're surrounded by people who love them, and they're eating great food, and they've got a roof over their head and things like that. And it's like, oh, but we're so blinded by it because we're thinking about what's in the future. So and I relate that to this idea of resilience, of kind of thinking about what's ahead, or, hey, I just had this setback. How does that create opportunity? Have you found anything that can help people in that moment of that setback to get them in that mode?
Yeah, 100%. And this is another kind of experience I had of the pandemic, where the lights were flashing all around me, and I wasn't quite seeing the signals through the fog. So I was, pandemic, being alone, work, chaos and uncertainty and all that other stuff. Lots of family related news that was very difficult to shoulder. and found myself really, depressed, like literally depressed, clinically depressed. And at the same time I was doing that, I was asked to create a resilience course for the ski industry. So I'm like doing all this research on resilience while I'm literally having a meltdown, and looking for a therapist and trying to get my life in order and everything. And it was really, really challenging. But I think this resilience course that I created and the model that came out of it is something that really helped me through that challenge. And one of the discoveries that I think that helped me and may help others is this idea of being just completely truthful about the situation that you're in. Because you talked about living in the present, and there's all kinds of good in the present. And I would say, actually, there's a lot of truth in the present. Some of it's good, some of it's not good, really not good. And I think if you have the strength to really truthfully understand and lay out what's really going on, then I think you have a good chance of moving forward into other dimensions of the model I created. But it starts with this idea of really understanding that you have to, we call it, I mean, this is a clinical term actually from therapy, but this idea of radical acceptance, just like you really just not wishing something is a different way, but really truly looking at the situation for what it actually is. And sometimes it's hard to look at.
Yeah, it really, really is. And it's this idea of what that says to me is this: we're so good at attaching stories to what happened to us, where we want it to have more meaning than maybe it necessarily has. In some cases, that might help us. At least for me personally, I feel like it hurts. It gets in the way a whole lot more. This thing happened. Okay, well, I just decided it's going to mean all these things. We tend to make things mean negative stuff. I don't know. At least that's what my brain and ego like to do. So is there anything that you found in this model that you've created that can help people kind of have that reframe?
I think so. Is it all right if I just share it real quick?
Yeah.
This model. I mean, we can use our technology to show a quick picture of it so that people get a sense of what we're talking about. I think it's a little more helpful that way. But in this, there we go. You can see it here. So basically, the center of the model is all about understanding. There we go. The staunch realism with personal agency. So that is, what's really going on. And balancing that with what do I really control, and letting go of those things that you don't have, actual control of, and being honest with yourself about those things. I think that's the starting point. Being really, really diligent about understanding those two things. But understanding this gives you the courage to face the situation, which I just talked about, but also the courage to face the triggers that you experience along the way, right? So what is it about, I talked about loneliness before. What is it about loneliness that has me agitated or gets me off my game? There's some, stuff under the iceberg there that probably is worth discovering. But facing that is an important part of the process. And we can get through what are our threats and what are our triggers that way by understanding that they exist. And then the other side of the coin here is, developing the confidence to access the possibilities, right? So, we think that's, based on or possible or that can happen when we do get a clear view of the situation and what we can control. That does filters out all of the wishful thinking, all of the ideas that we think we should do or that other people say we should do, and gives us a kind of a filtered and sort of clearer and more pure set of possibilities that are actually, possibilities that are possible. How about that?
Imagine that.
Yeah. And then the other here, and this is kind of a little bit more, we were talking about resources before. just an understanding of what resources we already have at our disposal to work on. Like we're not like when, a lot of times when we have a setback, we think we're broken, we're destroyed, we're crushed, but we actually have tons and tons of things available to us that we sometimes forget. Like, like our values, our attitudes, our mindsets, we call those, self qualities, but also, your expertise and experience, like, which is like skills and knowledge. And then finally, your family, friends, and community, the social supports that keep you going. All these things are, if we need to remind ourselves that these things are there, so that we don't kind of fall into the trap of believing that we've got, we're completely tapped out and have nothing left to be resilient with.
Yeah. You know what this makes me think about is how cool it would be to have that as like my resilience card. Because what I find is that when you're in the moment of some unfortunate thing happening, when you're really trying to, muster the energy or what have you to go and move forward in some positive direction and not just be buried in what's happening, it's like this card that you almost pull out of your pocket and you're like, oh, okay, great. Here are the things that I've wrote about when I was not in this triggered situation of like, these are all the resources that I have. These are the possibilities.
Yeah.
That it would just be a helpful little one thinger to keep in your pocket almost.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. Like the way this evolved was, some conversations, as I mentioned, this was, largely driven by a need in the ski industry to deal with, the pandemic, and what are ski resorts going to do when customers start coming back. Customers are going to want to be in vacation mode, but they're coming into a workplace where the employees have not yet left their, that COVID paradigm, right? So there's a mismatch of so what do we do when an angry customer is, not wanting to put their mask on, for instance, or whatever, and then a very depleted, very tired employee has to go up to that customer to, tell them to follow the rules. Like, how do you muster, the strength to do that? And day after day after day after day. That was the origin of this resilience course, and I think it just has so many more practical implications across, all of humanity that we're kind of taking it a little bit broader and making it more available to others. And I'm actually going to be writing a book about it. So,
oh, super cool! I cannot wait for that.
Yeah,
and it makes me think about all the silver linings that I think will eventually emerge from the pandemic. And I say that with the most amount of compassion and respect that I possibly can, since we just passed the unfortunate milestone of over 500,000 people losing their life here in the United States. But one of those things that, we can make sure that those people's lives are not in vain is that it's waking us all up to the need to take care of ourselves better and to have tools and resources like these across all aspects of our life. And so I know you focused a lot on what's happening in the workplace. And so I have to imagine that when you don't have, these resiliency tools, stress at work just like continues to compound. And so what have you heard in your coaching practice or the companies that you work with? What are you seeing when it comes to workplace stress right now?
Well, it's as bad as it has been, and it was bad. There's all kinds of really troubling news on that front. Like, I think Gallup has been measuring people's self description of mental wellness for 20 years, and it's never been lower than this year. It's always been low. I mean, it's always been in the kind of 60% say they're feeling okay. It's dipped down like into the 40s now. And I think that's not just people who are experiencing the pandemic, but it's, the job loss and it's people who don't know if their job is going to stick around even, and things like that. So a lot of really horrible things. But even before the pandemic, I think there's, workplaces were really struggling to develop engaged employees that wanted to, quote unquote, bring their discretionary effort and, feel good at work. How do we attract talent when people are disengaged? Gallup also has a famous study that's been going on forever about the percentage of employees who are actively disengaged at work, and it's in the 70s, and it's been the 70s for such a long time. And I kept thinking to myself, why is it that way? Like, certainly after 20 years or 30 years, some of those people who were the bosses that created the employees that created that data have gone, and only to be replaced by other bosses who are doing the same thing. And when you look at the who makes up bosses, and it's largely men, this is why I have a job. I'm in the masculinity aftermarket, right? So like that. So I think what we have to do is like really understand what it is about male leadership that creates these kinds of stressors at work. I mean, it's not exclusive to men, obviously, but there are systems and structures and sort of attitudes and beliefs and long held, um, understandings that this is the way work ought to be. And I would like to challenge that. That's why I created High Peaks Group in the first place, was to challenge this idea, that we can actually create workplace greatness. And I have a pretty high bar when it comes to that definition. I believe we can create, and we should and need to think about creating workplaces that actually extend people's lives, not shorten them. And if we can do that, we can totally flip it on its head and have people clamoring to go to work and never wanting to leave their jobs, and just asking what else can they do to stick around and not retire. And so I think that would be a beautiful thing for people to feel so good at work that it's a place of comfort and refuge and life-giving energy, as opposed to that thing I have to do that gets in the way of all the fun things I like.
Yes, it's tragic. It really is tragic.
Yeah. Why did we decide to do that? Like, why did we set up that way?
We're going to talk about that in 1 second. I want to do a quick plug because we had a question roll in. And so I think what I'm going to try this time is we'll do some Q&A at the end. So if you're listening to this live, drop a question in the chat. We're going to come back to those later. That way we can kind of keep rolling with the conversation. And just in case I miss them, we don't go back to something awkwardly in the middle of our conversation. So shout out to the Centered Coach for dropping in a couple questions for us to come back to. But yeah, why the heck do we do that, man? Like, why do we keep signing up for jobs that, like, we know more likely than not we're going to get a year or a couple years in and just be like, yep, well, this was another one of those. Like, why is our bar not higher for the companies that we go and work at in those environments? And it just seems so strange that with talent being the most important asset, at least, that's what the marketing department would lead you to believe for most companies. And then you get ping pong tables and you get catered lunches and like all these things, which sure on the surface are nice, but like at the end of the day, people still go home exhausted, frustrated, sad, maybe happy on some days, but like they really just want to go do the other stuff, and they got to do their job to do those things.
Yeah, it's true. And there's a close person in my life who I just talked to the other day, who's talking about, they would not be interviewed by the marketing department because they're like, I'm just playing the game. I'm here for the paycheck. I hate my boss. I hate my team. I hate the work I do. I hate the company I work for. I hate my commute. I hate everything. But I'm doing it. I have to do it. I'm going to do it. I don't care. I really don't care. So, and I think about like, okay, so how can I, with this, engage a person like that and have them feel like I'm not just kind of coming in with the next big fad, or, trying to blow smoke or whatever. Right. And that, I think that's the challenge. I think there are way, way more people like that out there than we think. We read all these great business books about outstanding cultures and great things going on. And, and those are wonderful examples. And I think that's the exception rather than the rule. And we need to reach folks like that who really, I think it's more than just about being happy. I think it's about being like seen and heard and valued, and really, having a belief that what they do with their time actually matters. But that to me, that's what I'm trying to do.
And how much do you think that this comes down to one of the things you alluded to earlier is that most organizations still this day are run by men, predominantly white men, that gets in the way of a lot of this change happening?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think and we keep hiring them, right? And they keep ending up as CEOs, even despite all of the attention we pay to trying to create more inclusive workplaces and creating more opportunity and things like that. We still end up, where we are. So it sometimes feels like just an impassioned conversation as opposed to actual action in a lot of ways. So, I think we all have to do our part. Obviously, we all have to kind of create those moments and opportunities. I know I've had coaching conversations with people where they've, a boss was considering promoting people or bringing new people on board, and trying to direct that conversation in another path so that they see other possibilities and other options for themselves, and for the see other people in those seats. But you're fighting against momentum and mindset in those conversations. That's really hard to get people. And these are all well-intentioned people who are nice enough. They don't mean any harm, but the cumulative effect of millions of folks like that in the workforce, it's has a compounding effect.
Yeah, for sure. And you've got years upon years of experience too of, well, this has worked in the past, so why don't we just keep doing it this way? And it seems like it's still easy to ignore a lot of those, like polls like the Gallup poll, right? And I think you mentioned kind of confirmation bias earlier as well, is just, you look at that or you think, oh, well, yeah, God, that really sucks, but certainly not my company. I wouldn't be doing this. Have you found anything that makes it hard or easy for leaders to look at what's really going on in their organizations and take a step back and say like, oh, wow, we really need to rethink how we're operating here?
Well, there are stories of where it's worked, but I think the reality of most businesses is that when it comes down to prioritizing inclusion, it has to compete against profit and all of the other things that everybody else is so good at and gets rewarded to do. Right. So it's not seen as sort of a core function of anyone's job. It's seen as kind of a way of doing their job. And it's easy for people to just kind of blow it off and ignore it or put it farther down the priority list, kind of a we'll get to it later kind of thing. And then it just never gets attended to. And so I think that's the challenge that we need to, get into boardrooms and, C-suites and things and sort of make sure that, that the strategic priorities are right in an organization and that there are, real consequences for failing to achieve those strategic priorities around inclusion, diversity, fair hiring, fair recruitment, all those, fair pay, compensation. The Salesforce.com, famously leveled their compensation. They had a huge gender gap in their compensation structure. It took them like 18 months to level it out for everybody. They went back a year later and it was all out of whack again a year later.
Wow.
How did this happen? It requires an enormous amount of effort and focus to maintain the momentum. You can't just do a workshop.
You can't just do a workshop. Famous words right there. So I was going to ask you next.
Says the guy who does workshops.
Exactly. So when you go into an organization, I'd love to know two things. One, why do people come to you? What are they looking for? And then what does that work look like inside of an organization, kind of start to, I won't even say end, but just start to journey.
Yeah, well, I know people come to me because I kind of give them a straight answer, and I don't try to I'm sort of like the safe, positive OD guy, because I don't talk like the normal organizational development people who are kind of very abstract in their language. Um, so that's one reason, but I think also because I offer a lot of really practical solutions that work. I have a strong research base to the work I offer. One thing that a lot of my clients appreciate is when we do team effectiveness work, I say to them, look, it's not about building better relationships with your team members. That's not, that's an outcome of work that you do together. So, you know, doing an icebreaker, doing an offsite where people are kind of like, zip lining or something like that is fun, but it's not going to increase team effectiveness. What does increase team effectiveness is scoring a win together, like actually doing the hard work of getting a win. Then the relationships start to form, and then you can go have fun. So, like, I think that's appealing to folks because they know that they, like, I think deep down understand that that's true, because I think a lot of people have had that experience of getting to know someone on a team that they maybe had mixed feelings about, but then they revealed themselves as awesome in a team. And they're like, oh, okay, now we have some shared experience on a level, on a shared experience on this sort of playing field. So we can relate as human beings. So it's a little weird, but that's what the research says works best for teams.
Getting wins.
Gotta get wins.
Who doesn't like wins? What does your work look like? Obviously, you're not going running zipline courses. What's a workshop with High Peaks Group like? And like, you said it's clearly not a one-time workshop solves all your problems. So what does it
Right.
What does it look like?
Yeah. So it's it's kind of a longer learning experience, or a sort of an organizational development experience, where we really sort of start with empowering the leaders to lead in a way that focuses on their team's strengths, right? So I think that is sort of like the first layer is working with the senior executives to understand how they approach leadership, what their what their kind of assumptions and beliefs are around leadership, and working with them to say, there's a better way, there's a different way, there is the strengths-based approach that assumes the best in people and your teams, and if you tap into that, you'll see better results faster. So that's step one, and then step two is really coaching those leaders to engage with their teams more directly. So as opposed to me doing it, which is somewhat helpful, having the leaders, whispering the leaders' ear to coach their teams in a new way, or and to lead their teams in a new way, is the thing that tends to create the actual momentum of change in the organization. So that's what I stick with through through their process of getting it under their belt, and then move on from there.
What are the things that you've seen leaders, specifically men, struggle with the most as they kind of undergo a change or a shift in this mindset?
I think letting go of what they think leadership actually is, and how they're supposed to do it. One of the saddest moments I had as a coach was when I was asked to coach a senior leader in a healthcare organization, and there was all kinds of tumult going on, and lots of people vying for even higher level senior positions and things. And this guy got passed over for a big promotion, and so I was talking to him, and I said, "So how are you doing? I mean, I know that I don't know how much you wanted that. You kind of it seems to me like you were working 19 hours a day. So now you're only going to be working 14 hours a day. So maybe that's not a bad thing. Anyway, he's like, I'm devastated. My wife's disappointed in me. My parents are disappointed in me. And look at this. And he opened his drawer of his desk, and it was like loaded with prescription drug bottles. And he's like, this is how I get through. I'm like, wow, okay, we've got a problem. So obviously that was not a coaching issue. That became something else. But I think that's those are the options men sometimes feel like they have. They're limited to, which is this sort of like stuffing it down inside and sort of, medicating or, somehow trying to forget the actual feelings that they're feeling, as opposed to expressing them and, naming them and giving them some daylight. So I think when they do, like, my experience telling, when we started, just the ability to talk about what it is you're experiencing, it just helps. It really does. You get a chance to say things out loud, whether it's to a coach or a therapist or even just a buddy, really does help put things in perspective. And, going back to the resilience model, getting a clear understanding of the situation, and seeing it for what it really is and not what you're mad at,
Definitely. What has helped you, or have you heard through your clients have helped them with that initial sort of opening up, hey, let's talk about it?
Yeah, there's typically for men, it's either a slow evolution towards some form of enlightenment, which is rare, or it's a massive wake-up call event. Annie McKee, who's a former boss of mine, now is a doctoral advisor at Penn, wrote in a book with Richard Boyatzis and Daniel Goleman about these wake-up calls, these sort of massive events that sort of like ring people's bells and get them to sit up and pay attention and recognize that, hey, this isn't going the way I was planning it to go, or it is going the way that I planned it, and it sucks. Right. So like, hey, I'm a brain surgeon, but I literally have no life, so like, that's not cool. I don't know my children. So, like those kinds of wake up calls are the things that really get people to kind of stop for a minute and recalibrate. And if they are, have the presence of mind to bring in a person to speak with, whether it's a coach or a friend or someone else, they often are able to reconcile where they're at. And some go back to what they were doing, but they're happier, and some change course entirely.
Yeah, I'd love to go and read that book. Do you happen to know the title of it off the top of your head?
Yes, I think it is called. There's a number of books that Annie McKee has written on this subject. One is called Becoming a Resonant Leader. This is one I would recommend to anyone who's like wants to do a little self-exploration and sort of self-reflection. It's a workbook, literally, of exercises where you can, go through your own private self-exploration, and it's designed for an executive to do on a plane. So really, really good. But they do talk about wake-up calls and some of this idea of what, when we kind of find ourselves in a situation that we didn't expect.
Yeah. Wake-up calls is one of those ideas that I'm kind of becoming more obsessed with. Pushes it a little bit too far, but like very, very interested and curious about. Can you pinpoint any major wake-up calls that you've had in your life that's kind of been like, oh, whoa, I need to look at this differently? Or are you the slow and steady enlightened guy?
No, definitely not. One I just recently wrote about was a hike I did in the Grand Canyon, where I was, again, ironically enough, it was a leadership development experience, hiking for a week in the Grand Canyon. I went, and my brother-in-law had died about 10 days before this trip. So he had literally fallen out, he had a paragliding accident where he fell. So now I found myself hiking on this trail in the Grand Canyon, and there was steep cliffs, and I literally lost it. I lost my mind. I was unable to proceed. And there's a story of how the guide helped me through that process and helped me to sort of really, really focus down in on just the thing I could control, which is just the ground under my feet. That's all that mattered. Everything else was just, irrelevant and not worth paying attention to. So he opened his umbrella to shield me from the sun and the peripheral view. So that moment, I think, when I was like feeling like I was going to die, was a huge wake up call for me, because I recognized that, I was not kind of emotionally and mentally prepared for I hadn't done enough work personally to be ready for that. And it deepened my practice and meditation, and also in leadership, because I felt that, I wanted to be better than that.
Yeah.
But I was on that path to just being like, well, I'll mail it in. It's just a walk. Why wouldn't I? What's so hard about that? Walking through the desert,
Yeah. You never know when the thing that you think is easy is going to end up being the hard one. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, that's quite the story. You said you wrote about it. Is this a publicly written about thing, or you wrote about it just in your journal?
Yeah, no, I wrote about it. It's on LinkedIn. So if folks want to check out the post I put there. It's also posted in my blog, highpeaksgroup.com/pathfuel, but easier to find on LinkedIn probably. But thanks for putting the website up there. Yeah, and I would love actually feedback on that. If folks want to share their experience, or talk a little bit about those moments where they've had wake up calls, or serious kind of crises of conscience. It'd be really great to elevate those stories for others too.
Yeah, no, I like that idea. I'll definitely include that in the show notes, and we'll share it out when we're sharing more of the episode. That could be a fun follow-up thing too, like we're kind of discussing earlier, is if you watch this, we want to do a follow-on kind of AMA after people have had a chance to listen, and maybe we could bring people up to share their wake-up moments and what came after it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's true that talking about your experiences helps, why not provide that opportunity for folks?
Yeah, that'd be cool. We'll make it happen. All right, let me go jump over and see what questions came in.
Awesome.
It looks like we just had the one come in from earlier. So it was when you were talking about your model and external resources we can tap into.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, how do you help convince people who tend to be very, very or fiercely independent reach out and ask for help from others? How do we get over that barrier?
Well, I mean, the first question is, why would they need help from others? But I think that's part of how I would unpack that question is there, for every question, there seems to be a should in there. So what ought to be done, who is oughting, right? So I think the work of the coach would be to really help that person really understand what it is what help might look like for them, as opposed to what I think help looks like. If I think help looks like reaching out and asking for, asking a lot of people, that's my bias. But if I talk to the client about, hey, what's one thing you could do that might help you kind of get tap into resources you already have. They're like, well, I can do this one thing. I can explore this one little tiny thing. It's like, great. Then that you do you, right? Like as long as they're making progress and feeling like they are in control of their own situation, that's good. That's really good. So I think that but I think underneath that question is this idea of resistance to change, right? And I think everybody has that, because there's so much, most people choose the devil they know versus the devil they don't know, right? So the fear of the unknown is a very strong thing for people. So it's scary, just having compassion for the fact that it's scary to change is really, really critical. And, especially when people are really vulnerable and experiencing these setbacks, getting them to even acknowledge that they're experiencing a setback, I think is progress, let alone how they can get help and from whom.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, man.
Well, I'd love to wrap up with your parting wisdom for our live viewers and future watchers. What is some advice, tips, tools, just final parting thought that you'd like to leave people with?
Yeah, I think I kind of want to start where I began, with this idea that we're all kind of capable. Like, we are, like if a guy like me who walked into a graduate program in organizational development as a skeptic can walk out of that program believing that people are essentially glasses half full, then I think that's something that might be worth paying attention to. Like, and I hope that others believe that and feel that and are willing to be open to that idea that everybody you encounter is a glass half full and has tons of resources to help themselves. They might need some support and help along the way, but if we just sort of have a fundamental positive regard, this is what my professor David Cooperrider said about about organizations and people. It's like, which is basically love. If we have fundamental positive regard, unconditional positive regard for others, I think that takes us a long way in making sure that we are, we're just creating a better world. We're seeing each other as human beings. We don't have to get wrapped around the axle about what's masculinity, what's not masculine. Am I being, those are all very important and complicated topics. But I think at the end of the day, if we can just sort of unconditional positive regard for others, I think we'll be well on our way.
There we go. We just need more love in the world.
More love from the city of Philadelphia.
Exactly. Brotherly love. Well, I so appreciate you coming on the show tonight. I look forward to more collaboration, since now that I know that is something that you draw a lot of energy off of. So I look forward to what's going to come. But thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Really, really delighted to have this conversation. I could go for hours on this, but thank you for having me.
Yeah, we'll have you back on again. We'll keep going. I'll wrap up and we'll be right there.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, if you tuned in live tonight, thank you so much for being here. I have like a little icon up in the left-hand corner that has an eyeball and some numbers next to it. So if you stuck with us the whole time, thank you for being here. So much appreciated. And next week, we've got another great show coming up. I hope that you will tune in. Of course, if you haven't already, give us a follow at Mandate the Show across, I think, pretty much every channel. So whatever your jam is, we're there for you. I try to send out a weekly update at the very least with the show that's coming up. So if you kind of want that notification the day of, it will go out on Wednesday. You can do that at the website. There are at least 14 episodes, I think, up on the site right now for you to go back through if you want to watch them, because that's your style. Cool. If not, we are on all major networks as well. And then, of course, you can always get in touch with Paul across LinkedIn, Facebook, and I think Twitter, but man, that might be wrong. Anyways, High Peaks Group across those channels. And then if you want to learn more about what they're up to, it's right there for you. So thanks everybody for being here tonight. And we will see you next week.